up with them and made them come back. The crew was arrested. They spent 60 days in jail. And because this whole activity was so well publicized, there were people, especially in Honolulu, but all over the United States, and indeed in some places all over the world, where people were saying, free the crew of the Golden Rule and stop the nuclear bomb tests. The boat was sold in 1958, and in 2010, it was a derelict boat floating around in Humboldt Bay in far northern California, and it was tied poorly to a dock, and a gale came up and it bashed against the dock and sank. See that big hole in her side? Poor thing. They almost burned her because they were just going to use her for fire, build a beach fire and have some fun. But Veterans for Peace came along and decided to rebuild her. So you can, they're here, they're kind of getting ready to put the engine in. So it took 5 years, and they launched back into the waters of Humboldt Bay. Then we started sea trials. And then from 2015 until 2018, we sailed all up and down the West Coast, from Victoria and Vancouver, BC, all the way down to Ensenada, Mexico. And finally, when President Trump started threatening Chairman Kim in North Korea, we decided it was time to head back out into the Pacific and see what we could do to stop all that possibility of nuclear war. So we headed to Hawaii, and we went to every Hawaiian island and gave talks everywhere except for Niihau, which you can't get to because it's restricted. But we gave over 100 presentations there. We took a lot of people sailing, and it was really great for having the boat back in Hawaii after all of those years. A lot of people we met had seen the boat in 1958, so it was really cool for them. We like to protest against Fleet Week. Do you guys have those there, where the Navy comes into your town?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, we do here. You can see Golden Rule in the background. Well, in 5 different cities on the West Coast, they bring in these giant warships, and they basically celebrate these, instruments of destruction. So we protest against that. We love the Marshallese people and had lots of activities with them all over the Hawaiian Islands. And finally, in May, this 2021, we brought Golden Rule back to San Francisco. And there she is at the Golden Gate Bridge. So, somewhere here, okay. I've got, that's the wrong slideshow. Hang on just a minute, please.
We have an air show instead. Instead of
right.
Week.
I am emailing myself the correct one. Sorry about that.
No worries.
The anniversary. Okay. Well, while this is sending, I'm going to let you know where we are now. So the Golden Rule just left Humboldt Bay a few days ago, and we're headed down to San Diego, where we were going to be there to celebrate the anniversary of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. However, so I'll be sending you another one, Martha.
Okay, Deckley. But weather caught up with you.
That's correct. So We were 2 weeks late getting out of Humboldt Bay, and then the boat last night had to pull into Santa Cruz. I must have hundreds of emails that come in a day. There it is. Again, I'm sorry to have covered the Golden Rule first. I intended to cover the United Nations Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons first.
That's okay. It's nice seeing the boat first, actually. It's fun.
Ah, there's the one I want. Okay, now play it. And turn my phone the right way. Okay. Does that come out okay?
That's perfect. It's working fine. Great.
Okay. So a large part of this section came from the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons. It's an international organization that both Veterans for Peace and separately the Golden Rule Project are part of. And so they have some good resources that we can use. And so here's about the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. It's illegal to develop, test, produce, acquire, stockpile, transfer, use or threaten to use, host nuclear weapons. And it's illegal to assist with these or engage in these activities. Now, assisting and encouraging also includes financing. And so if we have like banks that say we're not going to invest in nuclear weapons because it's illegal for us to do so because our country that this bank is part of has ratified the treaty, then that gives pressure on countries to not fund nuclear weapons. So I like that part a lot. If a country finally ratifies that already has nuclear weapons, there's a good, verifiable, irreversible, time-bound negotiation that goes on to start reducing and ultimately eliminating those weapons. Now, this is something that's required also under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty that all 9 nuclear nations are ignoring. So the Marshall Islands took those 9 nations to court. Ultimately, they didn't get anywhere with it, but it was a great advertising tool to say, hey, you guys are not following the rules on this treaty to negotiate for an end of nuclear weapons. And here's some things that are happening to make the treaty work. So you can get parliamentarians to help you, or legislators or congresspeople in our cases. And you can go to banks and pension funds and cities and places like that to say, divest your funds from nuclear weapons. Don't finance those anymore. So that means they'll take the money out of Raytheon and Boeing and McDonnell Douglas and some of the other big weapons contractors. And you can say, and furthermore, I'm not going to fund this university because they're involved with research and development of nuclear weapons. So there's good divestment tactics. Golden Rule was part of the I Can, Cities Can't appeal, which is get your city, go to your city council and say, look, we want to work on getting rid of nuclear weapons. Do a resolution. Pass a resolution that calls on the US government to sign and ratify the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons and take other steps to stop the possibility of nuclear war, like end the president's sole authority to launch the weapons, take the ICBMs off of hair trigger alert, take the, if you have to keep them at all, separate the missiles from the warheads. So it takes a while to get them back on again before you can launch them. It gives you time for some sanity, things like that. Okay, we're involved in education, of course. Oh, I wanted to say that the reason I pointed out this cities campaign is the Golden Rule was instrumental in getting the city and county council of Honolulu, which is encompasses all of the island of Oahu, to sign such a resolution. So that was really great. Direct action. You can show up in front of banks. You can show up at shareholder meetings. You can do, you know, street theater. There's a whole bunch of kind of direct actions you can do. You can do displays of survivor testimonies from Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and you can donate to ICANN or us or whatever you'd like as far as that's concerned. I like this. Setsuko Thurlow, who survived the atomic bombing of Hiroshima, said, "Nuclear weapons have always been immoral. Now they are also illegal." And so when the treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons came about because there was a research study that talked about the humanitarian impact of nuclear war. And if even 100 modern nuclear bombs were dropped, like India and Pakistan each own 100 nuclear bombs. So if they had a nuclear exchange and conflict over the territory of Kashmir, for example, that would blow not just radioactive fallout, which wouldn't fall out very fast, into the stratosphere, but also would suck up dirt and fire debris. The whole firebomb that's part of a nuclear bomb would go up into the stratosphere, and it would get dark because it blocks out the sun. And I know you've all heard of nuclear winter. This is this small scale one, small exchange would cause nuclear autumn. It would affect crop production for about 10 years. And during that time, 2 billion people are at risk of starvation. It's the humanitarian aspect of this that took this discussion away from the United Nations Security Council, where all the nuclear armed countries have a say, to the General Assembly. That's why on July 7th, 2017, the language on the prohibition of nuclear weapons passed by a vote of 122 to 1 to say, okay, this is the language that we want as a world body to implement. And the treaty says that as soon as 50 countries have ratified it, it'll go into effect 90 days later. Well, Honduras was number 50. And on January 22nd, 2021, the treaty went into effect. And now we have 59 countries have gone all the way through signing and ratifying, and another 86 countries have signed it. So this really speaks to the desire of the world's people to get rid of nuclear weapons. One other thing I want to talk about is that Veterans for Peace just started a nuclear abolition working group, and their very first product is the nuclear posture review that we just put out this week. Now, every administration, every US president since Clinton has put out a nuclear posture review. This says whether nukes are important in our overall security strategy. And then under Obama, he decided to renovate every aspect of the nuclear triad. So all of the bombs and missiles and boats and submarines and bombers and control systems, everything is being completely redone. Even the plutonium pits in the middle of those bombs is going to be a different design. So they've got to make a bunch of new ones. They can't even take them off the old missiles and put them on the new ones or on the old warheads. So it's going to be about $2 trillion to, quote, modernize the entire nuclear arsenal. So we're very much against that. And so anyway, that was a result of the nuclear posture review that Obama did, and that's carried forward. They didn't cancel anything. And so the nuclear posture review, although Biden tends to want to de-emphasize nuclear weapons in our overall US security strategy, it actually gets written by people in the Pentagon. So he's kind of, he could write it himself, or he could have more or less pro-nuclear people write this, but it's not looking very hopeful for the nuclear posture review. So what we're doing is, as Veterans for Peace, is we're saying, hey, you need to straighten up, stop slouching, and get yourself a correct nuclear posture. So here's some excerpts from the nuclear posture review. Now we kind of do an overview where we talk about, for one thing, the state of nuclear weapons in the world today. You can see that the United States has 5,600 and Russia has 6,200. And then, you know, North Korea maybe has 40 or 50. Israel has, you know, a couple hundred. You know, but you can see these small numbers compared to the US and Russia. It's really up to us to take the first step. I mean, look at China. It's only got what, 350 maybe. So we propose the US immediately cease the nuclear modernization program and redirect those funds towards non-carbon, non-nuclear energy systems to reduce the impact of climate change and provide for other societal needs. And then use that money for things like healthcare and retraining the workers in the nuclear industry to do something better with their lives. I think everybody would really like to do that. So HR 2850 is the bill that proposes all of that. And it's been introduced by Eleanor Holmes Norton, the non-voting member of Congress from Washington, DC. So here's some of the changes we want to make. We want to make unilateral, immediate posture changes to reduce the danger of an unintended nuclear exchange. So implement a no first use, no launch on warning. Maybe you want to call it a single purpose nuclear posture immediately. So you can say, we're going to separate all of the warheads from the missiles, and that would possibly get rid of the whole ICBM program. The ICBMs and other ground-based programs are only for first use because they are considered sponges for a first attack. They are use them or lose them. So get rid of the sole authority and get rid of the anti-ballistic missile systems, which are out there that make it so that we can have a first strike and nobody can strike back. Well, that's just nuts, because that means it's more likely that we're going to strike first, and it's very destabilizing as far as the nuclear balance is concerned. We also want negotiations to happen for nuclear disarmament. So we want countries to, our country, to sign and ratify the UN Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. But we want a whole change in our attitude. The United States tends to be a bully, and we want them to start negotiating for reduction and elimination rather than just saying, well, we might use our nukes against you. And furthermore, as Trump went, we might use nukes against a non-nuclear country, a country that uses cyber weapons or biological weapons or chemical weapons. And we want to protect US interests, which really means US corporations that are where they shouldn't be. Obey the Non-Proliferation Treaty, negotiate bans on nuclear weapons in space and you know, cyber attack bans, ratify the Comprehensive Chess Ban Treaty. There's a moratorium on it right now. Re-implement the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty and get rid of those ballistic missile defense systems, and re-implement the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, which, you know, that's what protects Europe from primarily Russia. and they want it back. And then finally, implement our treaty obligations. So get rid of the US weapons that are in Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, Belgium, and Turkey. Bring home the submarines that are carrying nuclear weapons, ground the bombers, dismantle the missile sites, get rid of the nuclear modernization program, clean up the uranium mines and mills, clean up the nuclear production facilities and the testing facilities, including in the Marshall Islands. Okay. And, you know, retrain the workers so they can do something life affirming instead of life destroying in their work. So that's all I have to say. It's about 4:30, and that's about as long as I wanted to talk without you guys getting a chance to ask questions. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. Let me see. There's a button down here somewhere. There we go. Stop share. Got it. Got it. Hi.
Hey, everybody. Who has questions? Jackie, you want to unmute yourself?
Yeah. As I said before, I don't know who Helen is and where do you live? Are you in Hawaii now?
Well, so we didn't really have a home up until 2.5 years ago. So we followed the golden rule everywhere in the RV that we were living in. Now we have a home in the center of Northern California, Clear Lake.
Oh, okay.
I think, Jackie, the official position of that Helen has is a Golden Rule project manager. So that means right now you're in charge of the crew that's aboard her, and you just make sure that every day that goes by, you know where she is and who's doing what. Is that your?
Well, that's part of it. So I find crew, I train crew, I maintain the boat or make sure that somebody is doing the maintenance. I am the primary public speaker. I help arrange, well, I do most of the work on arranging speaking events. I make sure we've got a dock. I make sure that shore support's happening, which is sometimes my partner and I. Like a couple days ago, we arrived in San Francisco where the Golden Rule was coming in so that we could wave them into the dock and take the crew out for breakfast. You know, there's a lot to being project manager, you know, janitor, whatever.
Sounds like a lot of work.
Well, you know, sometimes it's, you know, all I can do in my life. Other times when we're not out sailing and doing stuff, then I can work on documentation and posting things on the website and the Facebook page and creating newsletters and calendars and things like that. So yeah, there's a lot to do.
So I have a question about the plans for when the Golden Rule comes to our coast, which is purportedly, depending on COVID and everything else, going to be in June of 2023. And if that happens, should we be putting that on our calendar and planning to have some sort of program in the Portland, Maine area?
That's correct. I suggest that you work with the Veterans for Peace there. That's a nice active chapter. And we would like to reach out and have events that are either at or that they're invited to for the Quakers, the Unitarians. We would like to give presentations in schools for students of all ages. And if it's in June and maybe schools are not open, then we find out where are the students, you know, how can we get hold of them? If it's a small town, then we just find out where in town does everyone gather? Is there a biggest church? Is there a community center? You know, where do people meet? So in Portland, Maine, about how big is Portland?
Jackie, do you know? It's pretty big. Yeah.
I don't know the number of people in Portland.
I can
Is
say
it-
biggest city in Maine,
Yeah.
for what that's
Do you think-
worth.
Could it be 1 million people?
I don't think so.
Well, I think we probably want to have maybe 3 events. It kind of depends on the capacity of the organizers. The plan does, the schedule that you have in front of you, Martha, does it say how many days we're planning to be there?
I don't have it in front of me, but I remember that it said June 22 and 23. So that's,
Okay, so we'll probably arrive on the 21st and leave on the 24th. So you have 2 full days with us. So we can plan 2 evening events. And then I oftentimes during the day for morning or lunchtime, I'll do a Rotary Club meeting,
oh. So
or I'll go to a school.
it says that Portland is 66,595 people.
There's
Okay.
just a little,
Yeah, so we'll plan maybe about 3 events, maybe 4, and we'll certainly put out a press advisory. Local newspapers love to put a giant picture of the Golden Rule on the front page with the press release is almost always word for word what we send to them. So we can talk about nuclear issues, we can talk about the Golden Rule, invite people to sign up to go day sailing.
Yeah.
And you know, you all might want to go day sailing.
Oh, I'd love to.
After Portland, you're going to be headed up to Bath.
That's correct. We're going to go up to Bath. And then we will either return to New York and go up the Hudson and Erie Canal system, or we might go around Nova Scotia and New Brunswick and go upriver on the St. Lawrence waterway. Not too sure. Or maybe we'll go up through Lake Champlain. I'm not sure what that route's going to be yet.
I was
So-
won-
Go
Go
ahead,
ahead.
Jackie.
I was just going to say, I was just wondering whether there was going to be any effort made to try to go somewhere where some of the Wabanaki could meet with you and you could share that history with them, since
I would love to have a couple of things go on. One is I would love to interact with whatever indigenous tribes are there in whatever way they want. If they have been impacted at all by nuclear issues, I'd love to talk about that. Even if it's nuclear power, that's great. If they just want to talk about how their brothers and sisters, the Navajo and the Lakota Sioux, have been affected by uranium mines, that's great. If they just want to say, you know, this is an insult to our culture and to Mother Nature, that's great. So I would love to invite them to be part of the speaking program if they'd like to. In addition, if we don't have somebody, it would be wonderful to acknowledge whose stolen land we're occupying.
Great. Land acknowledgement.
we will occupy it.
I'm
So
sure we can find somebody to come speak from the tribes.
Yeah.
That
And
would be
we've got
great.
enough time to plan around that too. As far as Bath is, do you know if the Veterans for Peace is planning, are you planning any programs there, or mostly because people want to meet you? And
Well, both. I think that, so we'll bring the boat in and hopefully we'll be able to do a combination land and sea-based protest. And I'd like to do that in lots of various places. I'd like to, whatever people want to pass out as flyers on shore as the Golden Rule is sailing around as close to shore as we can get, they can pass out a flyer like we've often done that says, here's what this boat is, here's what it's all about, and here's what we want you to do about it. Like, you know, tell your employer you want to retool and do something different at Bath Iron Works.
yeah, that would be great. We also, somewhere in there, we have a a decommissioned Maine Yankee power plant, but I'm not sure that the boat would fit up there.
No, it wouldn't.
It would
Well,
not.
even if not, we can still take a look at the method of decommissioning and how are those fuel rods being stored.
That would be fun. Thank you. Suzanne would know. Okay. Who else among us here has some questions? Any other questions? Peter has.
If I may, Helen, thank you for your time this afternoon. I am a plank owner recently. I have a sister living north of Santa Cruz in Davenport and wondered exactly where the boat would be in Santa Cruz. Maybe she'd get to see it.
There's a guest dock at the Santa Cruz Harbor, and I think the gate's not locked. I think all she has to do is go to the harbor and look around. What
Okay.
she's looking for is a mast that has big strips of leather around it. That's our main mast, and that's chafing gear. So when the throat of the gaff boom, the big sail has a boom that goes up, that gets lifted up. And when it's part way up, you don't want the part that goes around the mast to bang against it.
Right.
That's what she looks for.
Okay. And the other thing, this is being recorded. Is there a link I could use to take to the main chapter to share this discussion to help the promotion and to help them understand what's going on?
Yeah, our website is VFP, as in Veterans for Peace, VFPgoldenrule.org.
Right.
And people can call me. It's 206-992-6364 and ask about anything you want. I usually do answer my phone.
Sure.
And if you want to make a donation, you just go on the website. There's a donation button right there.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah,
And thank you, Martha.
I'd like to thank you all for being here because this is really special. I've been interacting a lot with Massachusetts Peace Action. They're a very active group in the anti-nuclear world. And knowing that there's a Maine Peace Action, there's probably peace actions everywhere. And I'd be really interested in having, if there is a national peace action organization, I'd be really interested in seeing if they'd like to partner up with us.
Yes, I think that over the next year, we'll have different ideas of how to do that. And actually, we've got a lot of intersectionality between the Massachusetts Peace Action, the New Hampshire Peace Action. Jackie's great friends with the National Peace Action. And so we've got a lot of different ways that if we can put ourselves together and think about it, there are a lot of different ways that we might help that happen.
If you want, Helen, I'll put my email in the box here in the chat. Can you see it where you're at?
Let me see. Just a sec.
Yeah, just put it. Oops, it hit enter.
Let's see.
And I'll share the chat with you too to make sure you get it.
That's what I need. Yes, and I just got that, and I will see if I can save the chat also.
Yeah. So if you send me an email, Helen, with what your thoughts were around the Peace Action National, I will forward it on to the head of Peace Action there. And
That would be great. Yeah, we need people that can get other people out and help us schedule events wherever we're going to be, that they also are.
Yeah, and Danny in Peace Action New Hampshire, he was a veteran. He's a Veterans for Peace person, and he's the head of the. He's marvelous too. So.
Oh, that's great.
I've
Yeah.
got a few other questions that have to do with the golden rule, if you do have time.
I
And-
have time.
Okay, great. One is, do you know if the golden rule knew about the Lucky Dragon? They must have known about the Lucky Dragon crew being contaminated because that was in 54.
Right, yes. And the Lucky Dragon people, I was in Tokyo, and there's a big museum with the Lucky Dragon 5 in the museum, and they talk about the golden rule there. So we're very much in touch, and you know, heaven forbid if it ever happened that we needed to find a new home for golden rule, we would certainly be welcome to put the boat there. But yeah, I was really surprised at being able to actually touch the Lucky Dragon 5 and see how big it is. It's lots bigger than the golden rule.
So when the golden rule actually took off in 1958, they knew they were incurring a certain amount of big risk by going out into the testing grounds or planning on going there.
Yes. Yes, they absolutely did. And the crew, the boat that took over in Honolulu and did make it to the Marshall Islands was the Phoenix of Hiroshima. And the captain of that boat, Dr. Earl Reynolds, had just spent 3 years studying the effects of radiation on children in Hiroshima. And during the 3 years he was doing that, he had a boat built. And when he was done with his work there, his family was on a 3-year cruise around the world and was almost back home again to Hiroshima when they encountered the crew of the Golden Rule. And they went to the courthouse and heard the testimony and were inspired to go into the testing zone themselves. And they did see possibly the last nuclear blast that the United States ever set off in the Marshall Islands.
So that was just amazing fortune that they happened to dock in Hawaii at the same time that all the rest of the crew was in jail. The Golden Rule people were in jail and they happened to be on the docks and meet them. That's just amazing.
Yeah, it was Dr. Reynolds and his wife and their two of their children and a Japanese crew member were docked just 2 slips down. We were on that same dock in 2020. And both of those kids are still alive, and I'm often in touch with both of them. So I get to hear the stories of what happened with the Phoenix of Hiroshima. Dr. Reynolds was arrested right there in the Marshall Islands and had to sail his boat back to Honolulu. And then he underwent 2 years of trial before finally being released with no conviction.
That's a tremendous difficulty brought upon that
I
family.
hear you, Martha.
That must have been so hard on the family to go through that.
Yeah.
And it's my understanding that the crew, before the Golden Rule was even conceived, there was a group called the Nonviolent Action Against Nuclear Weapons Group, and that included Bayard Rustin, as a matter of fact. And we just heard a talk about African Americans against the bomb, and that there are a lot of Black people that are really staunchly anti-nuclear that aren't recognized for their work. But it's my understanding that they actually went and saw one of the atomic bombs in Nevada when they were testing them, and they happened to witness it as they were getting out of jail, that group of people before
Oh,
the Golden Rule.
Could you send me a link to that? I really, really want to do intersectionality work and try to make what we do less of a old white people game.
Yes, for sure. And he's actually, Bayard Rustin is one of those people, you know how it was said that why are you complaining? This is the local news people in Hawaii. Why are you protesting against nuclear weapons? it's the United States and we only do good stuff. You should be protesting the communists. And in fact, Bayer Rustin was one of the group that went over to, I don't know, it was Norway or Sweden to meet with the Russians and complain about all of their nuclear weapons. So it was a two-way street. It wasn't just against the United States. It was against any of the states that had nuclear weapons that people were protesting, which is really important, I think, too.
I totally agree. In fact, the Phoenix of Hiroshima was sailed to Russia, and they talked with the Russians also about getting rid of their nuclear weapons.
Wow, wonderful. Two other questions. One was, oh, so all the way through the book that Albert Bigelow, who is distantly related to Peter Morgan, he always refers to it as golden rule, not the golden rule, but the title of the book is The Golden Rule. And can you kind of fine tune that? Can you get that straight in my brain, what the terminology is, how that works?
It's basically personal preference. I actually call her Goldie.
Perfect. I think that's it. Just the golden rule, know about the lucky drain. Okay, I think we're ready to wrap up. Any other questions? Suzanne, you must have some questions.
I don't have a question, but I have a concern. I don't think people are really concerned about nuclear weapons anymore. And I think we need a campaign to educate the people about the threat being very, very grave, because they won't understand why the golden rule is sailing up with a peace sign. But I think we need more education about the threat that hangs over us all, over the earth, frankly.
Yeah,
Well, thank you, because that's what we're all about,
yeah.
is
That'll bring
education.
a lot of attention.
And you guys know the origin of the peace sign. That's the Committee for Nuclear Disarmament in Great Britain. Was CND is the semaphore. When you put those things together, it has the interior, ND is the combination of an N and a D, makes up the very famous peace sign. And so, you know, peace and nuclear disarmament used to mean a similar thing at one time.
That's wonderful. Here's a question for you. During the 1/6 in Washington, D.C., the insurrection or whatever you want to call it, there's some video of Vice President Pence, whatever, going down the stairway, and he's carrying the briefcase. And I didn't know that both the vice president and the president had the briefcase. What does that mean? Are there actually two people that can press a button?
A nuclear
There
code.
are, yeah, I think there's 3 or 4 of them. And then there's all the delegates underneath them that can also press the button. So there's multiple briefcases, multiple possible delegates. It's not just the president, but any one of maybe dozens of people could potentially be in the position of holding a briefcase that could put an end to our civilization.
Interesting. On that note,
I have one more thing. It's not a question though.
go, Jack.
It's just to say, it's good to see you, Suzanne, and give my love to Charlie.
Thank you very much.
We don't get to
I've been
see each
there for a
other.
long. I was 14 years old when the bomb fell over Hiroshima,
And you remember it.
and I remember it. I remember everybody going to
I
church.
bet.
Yes, tell us about that. You said everyone went to church, and there wasn't a feeling of the people, massive quantities of people getting massacred.
Well, right. I never saw anybody cry except crying for the end of the war. I don't think people realize the enormity of what the United States had done in our name.
Right.
Well, even today, I was in Roswell, Georgia for 16 years. And the Roswell, I think it was Memorial Day, they had Paul Tibbets there as a speaker in 2004, I think it was. And he was heralded as a hero. It's
He's a
deplorable.
pilot? Was he the
He was the
pilot?
pilot of the Enola Gay.
Yeah, and he has no regrets. But there are many people involved that, finally do understand that this was all a big lie.
Yeah, but the citizens in Roswell don't know that. They had him come as a guest speaker.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, yes, you're right. A lot of people have regrets about the whole project, but people today, unfortunately, don't grasp the implications there.
That's why I'm so grateful for Goldie.
Right. Thank you, Helen.
Yes, thank you, Helen. So
Thanks to all of you.
before we go, any last words other than we'll be seeing you soon, hopefully, Helen?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Safe travels till then.
Thank
Safe
you.
travels, everyone. Go ahead
All
and
right, stay safe.
everyone,
Bye,
everyone leave.
all.
Bye.
Bye.
It's going to take me a while to shut down, but feel free to leave. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you.